And so to be anti-racist or exhibit anti-racism, we want to actively fight against the knowledge of that misuse of power. We want to actively fight against the systems that oppress subjugated groups, because if there's one dominant group, then there is a subjugated group. And those subjugated groups have ramifications because it's embedded in our systems and institutions. So when you control for certain factors, for instance, certain underrepresented groups can get access to certain housing or certain banking products or certain loans if you're a small business. Those are historical and those have been proven.
What is up, y'all? I am so excited to introduce you to my new friend who I will say we got connected through a mutual mentor who said, y'all have a lot in common and think you should have a conversation. And so she was so gracious enough to have our first conversation recorded on this podcast. And so I am very honored to have Cherese here to talk to us about her book, about getting wealthy as women, about anti-racism, and what you can do to protect yourself and your peace during these interesting times. So welcome, Cherese. Thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure. I know I'm in the company of another wealthy girl. Into that. So we have that in common. And so it's exciting. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yes. Okay. So let's actually start off with your book, because I think that's a good place for us to start. Sure. And then we'll talk more about the work you do at your organization. So can you introduce people to what your book is and who it's targeted for?
Absolutely. So my book is entitled A Wealthy Girl, 7 Steps to Prosperity, Peace, and Personal Power. And it's all about claiming, yes, all of that. It's all about claiming the wealth that you so deserve and that you are entitled to. And wealth needs to be way more expansive than the dollars and cents that sit in your bank account, or wealth more traditionally defined by economists, in that traditionally is your assets, your home, the cash you sit in the bank account, your savings minus your liabilities, any debt you might have, whether credit card or mortgage debt. And the result of that is your net worth or your wealth. And that's the traditional definition of wealth at a moment in time. But we know that there are so many things that give us value. And so my definition of wealth is much more expansive. It is that traditional, but also it's the intangible assets that we have. Our cultural capital, our relationships, and all of the things that make us who we are, our talents, our health. And so together that gives us a holistic definition of wealth. And you don't have to be old, white, rich male to have that. And so my book is really geared toward women, but of course, men, every man knows a woman in their lives, and the concepts are universal, but it is geared really toward women who want to have and enjoy their lives and want tangible steps to get that expansive view of wealth and that knowing that it's preserved for them.
I love that. There is a term that you just said that caught my attention. You said cultural capital. What do you mean by that?
Woo! So in addition to being an economics major, I also was an American Studies major, which is a critique of American history through the eyes of race, gender, and class. And one of the ways in which we get our sort of shape in the world is the capital, not the financial, but the cultural. So our experiences shaped by the culture around us, the arts, the music, the relationships, the social capital that can be part of the culture in which we grow up. How you do things might be different than how I do things. And that is by definition part of our cultural capital and the things that and the relationships and culture that helps move us from one place to the next.
I have not heard that term before, and I absolutely love that as part of your overall definition of wealth. We do have so much in common, and for myself, I also have two degrees, 2 majors in psychology and business. And so you have the economics and this degree. So between us, like we cover a lot of different areas when it comes to our education. But I love from what I've learned about you is that you are practicing this in your day to day, and without giving away the entire book, because I want to make sure that people have a chance to read it on their own accord. I wish I had a copy of it in front of me. I have the audio book. Oh, there we go. There we go. Oh, wait, we should do a little.
There you go.
Both of us with our our books,
author.
right?
That's right.
Is I would love for you to give us a synopsis of the first 3 steps of just like high level. What are the first 3 steps so people can get a taste of it? So what is step 1 that you talk about in your book?
Yes. So step 1 in my book is creating an environment for wealth creation. And creating an environment for wealth creation is all about surrounding yourself with the people that are going to lift you up and help you achieve some of your wealth goals. And so you talked about, for instance, the mutual connector, a mentor of ours. How important is it for us to have mentors and sponsors that are different from mentors that can actively, truly push your career because they might be sitting in your organization and can help promote you, things of that sort. I also talk about having a financial advisor or having a career coach and being part of, for instance, if you're an entrepreneur support group, which I was a part of. And so it's about who are the people that you identify that are going to be on your A team in order to give you that environment for wealth creation. It's so important. And that again might extend even to a therapist, which here these times require support from all levels. And we have to lean into where that support comes from.
Oh, I love that so
Yes.
much.
Yes.
And that's often not an area that we talk about in wealth creation. And I'm glad that you shared that as part of your steps. What I found was that a lot of folks that I coach, they feel like they cannot build wealth because they are literally not in the environment that is conducive to it. And I just posted earlier this morning about my journey of having gone from $300,000 of debt to about to cross over $2 million in net worth, but it took me 10 years.
Absolutely.
And the way that I framed it today was very similar to gardening, right? You have to plant, but you got to water and you got to grow it and then you got to harvest it. And people a lot of times often want to go straight to harvesting or straight to growing when there's not the right environment for those seeds to be planted.
Absolutely.
So that's such a great point.
And you got to prune. You got to prune too. So that's part of your garden analogy. And that kind of leads to my second step in wealth creation, which is working your craft. I started my career, even though I was an American Studies and Economics major, I didn't know finance. I wanted to go into investing similar to you. I graduated from college. I went to Yale University and I couldn't write a blank check to Yale. My parents worked 2 and 3 jobs to send me there. And we were too rich for financial aid, but too poor to write blank checks. And so I worked my entire time at Yale and I had a lot of debt. And so I wanted to go to Wall Street to help pay off that debt, but also learn how to make money and invest in the stock market. And so part of wealth creation and being a wealthy girl is working your craft. For me, it was learning the craft of investing. And so I had to invest to earn returns for large institutions. And because I didn't have that background, what did I have to do? I had to get into studying. I earned my chartered financial analyst charter, which took 3 years to get. And one of my mentors at the time said, Cherese, you tell me that you want to be a great investor, but if you're not willing to get your CFA charter holder designation, then what are we doing here? And so that was eye-opening for me. I had to work the craft to develop the skill set. Because like you said, sometimes we want the things, but don't have the skill set yet to achieve it. And so working your craft is being disciplined and dedicated and being ambitious, and that's okay in order to achieve that. And then the third step, just to give a little taste, is invest. And really, this is developing an investor mindset. Given my background as an investor myself, and now being more on the entrepreneurial small business side, the investor mindset, though, sticks with you. And you as an individual, if you can develop that investor mindset, which starts with being the CEO of your own money, because best investors have also an entrepreneurial bent to them. And I lay out all of the strategies of what it takes. But the first one is developing that vision and then claiming that for yourself. And I give strategies on how to have that mindset.
Hey everyone, it's Bernadette Joy. If you are ready to crush your money goals and learn the simple, specific habits that can help you pay down debt, save more, and reach financial freedom faster, check out my book, Crush Your Money Goals. It has been approved by Oprah, so go check it out. at Barnes & Noble's Bookshop, Amazon, or check out the audiobook. Ooh, all right. Now I'm seeing more and more my Bridget
Yes.
Ann connected us. I love this. I love that you talk about, again, and it makes sense. You said in the second step here, you had a mentor who said, what are we doing here? She gave you an exact step that you needed to take. It was going to be a long and arduous step, but it was a step that you needed to take.
Yes.
And so often, a lot of us say, nobody taught us, or we don't know where to start. And someone actually gives us a step and we're like, oh, but that seems hard. So we're not going to do that. And you did the hard thing. And similarly for me, in the beginning of the year, I have a mentor who has been generous in sharing her knowledge with me about angel investing, which is
Sure.
my next phase in my journey. And she said, you need to read this book. It was Angel by Jason Calacanis. And I was like, all right, she told me to read it, so I got to read it.
Yeah.
And I actually read a lot of books that often. And so I got the audiobook. I started listening to it while I'm going to the gym. And I'm sharing the story in the sense of I finished the book and it was very helpful, but I actually shared it with another client of mine who's also interested in angel investing. And she's a Black woman. And both of us agreed that while the book was helpful, it really was not speaking in a way that felt like it was
Speaking to you.
targeted for us. And so the fact that your book exists in the world is very exciting for me. And the fact that you're giving specific strategies around investing in it with your CFA is like so helpful to know that not only are you practicing what you preach, but you've been educated in this field. So you have both the street cred and the book smarts
That's right.
behind
A
this.
little bit of both. And what you just said in terms of you reading the book and also having that accountability partner, right? There's your wealth creation environment on the accountability, but also one of the things I think helps us as women, and particularly doing things that are perhaps foreign to us, is I have this concept called run a wealthy experiment. It's another step in the book, but it's about having a approach around wealthy experimentation. So you want to reach a wealthy outcome, whether it's angel invest, could be investing in the stock market, could be starting a business, but you haven't been trained. So let's do an experiment. Let's have a hypothesis, right? And the hypothesis is, am I validating something that I think is true, or am I not validating and disconfirming that hypothesis? And really, it is having the courage to go about that process. And you might learn some things, even if that experiment fails, you might just repeat the loop. So this process, and I shared a similar example where I became part of Yale's alumni investing group because I didn't do early stage investing. I did public equities where information is public, but I was very interested more in earlier stage investing. And so that journey of becoming part of that investor group was my wealthy experimentation. I want to encourage folks to go out and do that. And hopefully, like yourself, do it with a partner and learn. But yes, speaking in a way that's culturally competent and in a way that is familiar, because sometimes we can just make things more complicated, is super helpful.
I love that. And let's circle back because this all intertwines with creating an environment for wealth creation. You actually work at an organization that I believe is doing that. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, and it looks like 20 years.
20
Is that
years.
right?
We have our 20-year anniversary this year.
Congratulations. I love that so much. Again, I'm so happy that we're meeting because a lot of the and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of people who are doing great work, but they've been doing it maybe in the last 5 years or 10 years. So to say that there's this organization that's been around for 20 years to help with building wealth creation for what seems like a lot of entrepreneurs are often overlooked. Could you share more about what your organization does and how you are creating an environment of wealth creation?
Absolutely. And so I work at Next Street, and in my role as co-CEO, I shared that mantle with two other CEOs, Michael Roth and Sam Berg. And what Next Street does is that we're the nation's leading small business solutions. And so when I say small business, it's the Main Street small business that might be a restaurant or a dry cleaner to supplier small businesses that are selling into governments or corporates. We span that spectrum. And you might say, what kind of solutions? And so we are ourselves a business to business, or we sell into governments and institutions like corporations and philanthropic institutions provider, and we provide strategic consulting. We design and deliver small business programs. And then we do so also what we call our supplier resource hubs that connect resources by way of capital, by way of education, and by way of contracts to small businesses. One of the biggest challenges that small businesses, particularly those, and we have a focus on underrepresented small businesses from communities that might have been overlooked, we want to make sure that they have the right resources and those resources get distributed to them in a manner that they can find them. It's clear about what needs to do to get those resources. And because our country was built on systems and processes not made for certain groups of people. And so Next Street is all in the business of advancing any entrepreneur that has a boundless dream and opportunity. And so you asked about how does that create to wealth creation? Let me tell you, this goes back to the definition of wealth. What's one of the biggest assets that someone can have? Owning their business. The shares and the equity and the value of that business contributes to their assets. Households with an entrepreneur, on average, are 5 times as much of the traditional net worth than households without an entrepreneur. So we know that entrepreneurship in the case for small businesses creates wealth for individual families and ultimately also wealth for communities, because small businesses are the lifeline of this country. They create over 2/3 of private sector jobs and help us to be more resilient and innovative in all of the ways that we need to be. And so that is why I've decided to be here. I've only been here 9 of the 20 years, but my impetus for doing so sprouted from my own experience running a startup. And I was locked out, even with the pedigree that we talked about in the education of capital and the right resources and access. And so I wanted to do something about it. And that's why I decided to join and now lead Next Street.
I love that. I love that you said only 9 years. 9 years is a long time in entrepreneurship world. That's like years, you know.
Yes, I'm 9 of 20.
And I feel like this conversation is timely. I think I don't believe in coincidences. I think the time that we're having the conversation today is very helpful. So at the time of this recording, we are coming up on around 2 weeks since the start of the new presidential administration. And we are already starting to see, at least on my feed, tons of news and concern around the macro environment that entrepreneurs and businesses are going to have to face. And one of the big topics this past week has been around the rollback of many DEI programs.
Yes.
And like protections that are being lost for people of who traditionally have been able to benefit from getting an equal playing field. And so I would love for you to talk a little bit about what you're seeing in this new kind of market environment and changes in administration and kind of the corporate attitudes that you're seeing, and then we'll talk about, as an entrepreneur, what does that mean for you?
Absolutely. You're right. It's timely, it's relevant, and we're talking about it all the time. A couple of things I'll say here. Administrations will come and go. And obviously, this isn't the first administration for our current president sitting in office. And so we have a history of things that are announced. And I would say we will see where the dust settles, which has been a bit of our MO in terms of wanting to understand what are the implications for the federal approach to rolling back and questioning some of the DEI initiatives. And so we're part of watching and waiting because things change all the time. What I will say, though, and this probably speaks more to the corporations that have made public statements about their own changes in posture. And having been at Next Street also in the wake of George Floyd, in the wake of COVID that were happening at the same time, you saw so many companies make strong public commitments. And so you fast forward just almost 5 years later, and I have to be honest with the reactions to that. Anytime someone changes posture, I have to question, why are you changing posture? What does DEI mean to you? And it can be disappointing when perhaps what one said in the beginning might contradict what one says in the end. And yes, one can say that times have changed and things have evolved, but I think at times like this, organizations, and we are doing this at Next Street, have to stand in their own values. Our values, and we have major ones, come into place. Our mission is more important than ever. Our goal is to make sure that all businesses have the opportunity to succeed. And where we have supported underrepresented groups, we want to make sure that we still support the communities that have been left out and locked out of some of the systems historically. And so historical context is really important. I think people need to figure out what this means for their organization and really get in touch with their own values, because this is about values and this is about where you stand and how you will enact those values in what you do. And so the why definitely matters in this moment, and we have to stay abreast and ahead of the curve. I will say, specifically as it relates to small businesses, one of the coinciding trends that has been happening over the last several years is the industrial transformation that this country is undergoing. There have been massive, unprecedented trillions of dollars flowing into infrastructure, bipartisan infrastructure law that was signed in order to make sure that we have the right infrastructure, a green economy, and have the right energy conservation here. And that alone is spurring a demand for goods and services in this country that hasn't been seen since the New Deal. And so what that means is that businesses that are supplying into these supply chains, there is a case to be made for diverse businesses. There is a case to be made for small businesses. These are the businesses that are driving the innovation. These are the businesses that are being resilient. These are the businesses, as the data shows, when you have diverse supply chains, performance is heightened. And so there's a strong business case here. And it's always been the case with businesses when you have diverse voices and a diverse supply chain.
I so appreciate that commentary, and I feel affirmed right now in some of the things that I 100% agree with you, but also where I have personally decided to spend some time and energy. So a lot of people don't know that aside from doing Crush Your Money Goals and what you might see on social media on this podcast, that I am an accredited investor and I run an accelerator program for diverse small businesses. And one of the areas of my thesis is in infrastructure, exactly
Yes.
for the reasons that you said. And so two businesses that I am currently partnering it with, one does plastic pipe installation.
Mhm.
So if you think about like an aquarium or a large city that has all this water running through these huge pipes that you can actually walk through,
Absolutely.
the company that I work with fuses that pipe for these like miles and miles of pipe. And
Absolutely.
another company that I work with installs electric vehicle charging stations around the country.
I love it.
Yes, I know. I'm very excited. So, what is really exciting to me is that this year I had those two owners get together and they're trading best practices and they're helping one another out. And one of the things that we're implementing as a team is owner of the EV stations, Diego. He is fluent Spanish speaker, first generation Mexican American, and he's helping HDPE Training, the plastic pipe company, to build out a Spanish speaking training course to train the next generation of contractors for this specific field. And
Absolutely.
when I tell you there is nothing more that's giving me life right now than watching all of these things happening, that creating the environment, like you said, investing in other people, building that mindset, but also putting it towards real problems that we have in the
That's right.
US is very life-giving. And so I'm really grateful that you're mentioning this, because the other aspect that really caught my attention was recently I've been receiving a lot of kind of negative commentary on my social media posts every time I confirm that racism exists. And I'll say something along there was a post that I said, the reason that I speak on stages and the reason that I am very kind of loud about the different topics that I talk about is because up until this point, there weren't that many women or women of color who were
Yes.
speaking on topics such as these. And then my nerdy self, you would appreciate that as an economics major. I'm like, I want to do like some sort of correlation analysis of, let me just put the pictures
Yes.
of who these people are and what they're saying and the level of negativity. And there's absolutely a correlation.
Yes.
And on your website, what was so amazing for me to see is that you explicitly on the website talk about anti-racism as a core value of
Yes.
the organization. So can you share more about what anti-racism means to you and the organization? Because it seems like people don't seem to agree on that statement.
And I appreciate you calling that out. Anti racism is one of the six values of Next Street. Our six values: anti racism, sustainable growth, authentic joy, small business first, interwoven and empowered, and biased toward action. And so we live by these values because it's the values that really undergird the behaviors that we take as a culture, work culture, and then do and fulfill the mission that we have. So it's our kind of cultural code of conduct. Anti-racism is a value that came about in 20, and we as an organization had been doing the work as a leadership team around what is our own role in perpetuating systemic racism. And part of our own learning journey and my own learning journey is let's define racism, right? I think part of the reason why people seem to want to attack the terms or the words can be also part of a lack of knowledge about what it is definitionally. Racism is prejudicial bias plus the misuse of power by a dominant group, and in this country that's like white Americans and that race, but it's the misuse of power by a dominant group historically that pervades our systems and our structures. By definition, racism is institutional. And you often have to say institutional racism because people don't really understand the term racism. And so for us, we wanted to recognize that historical context that there has been a misuse of power by dominant groups in this country. That is the backbone of American history and American studies. And so when we recognize that, and you combine that with some of the prejudice that people might have, you have racism. And so to be racist or exhibit anti-racism, we want to actively fight against the knowledge of that. And so we want to actively fight against that misuse of power. We want to actively fight against the systems that oppress subjugated groups, because if there's one dominant group, then there is a subjugated group. And those subjugated groups have ramifications because it's embedded in our systems and institutions. So the data has shown when you control for certain factors, for instance, certain underrepresented groups can get access to certain housing or certain banking products or certain loans if you're a small business. Those are historical and those have been proven. The data is out there. And I want to encourage you, Bernadette, because the people that might be attacking you might not be as familiar with what racism means and perhaps unwilling to work their craft and understanding and doing their own journey around their own role. Everyone has a role to play.
You are so much more polished and more points than I am. You said they're not as familiar. I'm like, these ignorant people. And you're like, they're just not as familiar, Bernadette. They're not educated on these things. Like, you are so patient. I need a little bit more of your
Moment because social media and people will try to just weigh at you and chip away. And we are light in this world. And so we have to keep going and standing in the truth because history is not going to be erased under my watch. We have to tell the stories. We have to tell. My grandmother is 96 years old. And so she turns 97 this year. And so someone who lived right through the Great Depression and the New Deal and civil rights and Vietnam and all the things, racism exists.
You need to ask your grandmother to be on the podcast because I have so many questions. I have so many questions of what it's like to be on Earth for 97 years. Yes, please. I'm not even kidding on that. I find that so fascinating. And also, let's protect her at all costs. Like, she is a wealth of knowledge. So I really appreciate you saying that. And I feel like that's a great note for us to leave this episode on, because I know so many people who have followed my media channels for the last almost decade at this point. I've gotten behind the scenes messages and conversations in real life that sometimes it feels like we are running upstream, and it can be very exhausting. And so to hear someone like you who is so poised and consistent, I would say, with what you're speaking and what you're doing in your day to day is really inspirational for me. So thank you so much for taking time with me. If people want to learn more about you, how can they find you?
Absolutely. I appreciate it. And it's been a pleasure to be with you as well. Yes, they can go to my website, my personal website at www.cherese, that's CHARISSE says.com. There you can find links to my book, my blog, and you can connect at that same handle at Charisse Says on Instagram. And so that's where I am. If you want to hit me up at Next Street, our website is www.nextstreet, just like it sounds.com.
I love it. Thank you so much for taking time with me. If y'all like this episode, we will put all of her contact information in the show notes below. And if you want more content like this, especially on the days that you're feeling like it is not happening, it is not the time, listen to episodes like these and get back on the horse, as she told us. And I hope that you'll stay tuned for our next episode. See you next time. Bye.